Good animation won't fix bad storytelling. You may think that when making a LEGO stop motion, story is irrelevant compared to the actual practice of improving your craft and making better animations. But what if I told you that the actual story that you're telling, whether you realize it or not, is significantly more important than the actual animation itself? Like, just think about this for a second. There are older animations that, on the surface, just aren't that great of quality and may even look pretty choppy at times. But at the end of the day, nobody cares about that because the animation itself told a great story that stood the test of time and left a lasting impact on the viewer. And isn't that the kind of animations that you want to make? Not the kind that gets recognized for 1 week and then ends up being completely forgotten about the next, but the kind that leaves such an impact that it stays relevant long after it was first created. Right now, you're probably the type of person who puts a ton of effort into the quality of your animations in terms of making it look nice and appealing to the viewer, but takes very little thought into the actual story that your animation is based around and whether or not you're telling that story in a compelling way that keeps the viewer engaged and leaves them totally immersed throughout the entire film. Now, this isn't necessarily a deal breaker, and it doesn't mean your animation is automatically horrible if it doesn't focus on story first. But when you put little thought into the story of your animation, then you are leaving a lot on the table. Now, you might be thinking, but Owen, why is story so important? I'm not trying to go over here and make some deep, philosophical, 8-minute long film. I just want to make some cool animations and improve my craft. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of occasions where that is perfectly fine. There are times when you just want to sit down and make a random animation with no intention or story structure whatsoever. And that's completely normal. In fact, I'll occasionally do this myself whenever I want to make some random animation test or just want to experiment with something new before I implement it into a bigger animation. But if you want to make something lasting and impactful for the viewer that keeps them engaged until the end, then that can't be done just through stunning animation alone. It can't be done through perfectly timed editing cuts or intense music. All of those things do contribute to the overall quality of the animation, but all of those fall subject to the story and how you convey that story through animation. And before we dive any deeper, I want to make sure that you have the right idea for what animation is all about. You see, a lot of people think that they're making animations just for the purpose of making an animation. But that's simply not the case. You are not making animations and then coming up with a simple story just to justify the time you spend on it. You are telling a story. And LEGO stop motion is simply the medium through which you tell that story. Now, what do I mean by story? Because every animation has story in it to some extent or another. But to better understand what I mean, think back on some of your favorite movies you've ever watched. Are they the highest budget films with the craziest visual effects featuring just shy of 20 billion explosions? While those films can be cool in the moment, they're probably not your favorite kinds of films because if a movie has to rely entirely on spectacle and scale, then there's a good chance that the story itself just wasn't that compelling to begin with. More than likely, some of your favorite films are actually lower budget films with relatively simple stories that left a lasting impact on you when it came to an end. And why is that? Well, the truth is that films that make a lasting impression do not require massive budgets or crazy visual effects. It turns out that all that is required to tell a good story is simply a good story, because that is what films are all about, and that is what animation should be all about as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy watching super high quality animations with satisfying smear frames and buttery smooth movement that always follow a clean arc. But if the story just isn't there, then the quality of the animation matters very little to me. You see, no matter how jaw-dropping the animation is, if the story and overall message are just plain bad, bad, I'll have no reason to stick around to watch it, and I'll likely click off of it within the first few seconds, because the animation does not matter nearly as much as the story. And just to clarify real quick, I am not against short, random animations, test animations, or goofy skits. Those are perfectly fine. I am a-okay with those. What I'm mainly talking about here are longer animations ranging around 1 minute and longer. Here's the thing, if you're gonna spend weeks or even months working long hours on an animation, then why not make it the best it can be and leave a lasting impression on the viewer through a well thought out story? Like, if you're gonna spend 20 hours animating something, then why not spend an extra hour or two really thinking about the story and what you want the viewer to leave with? Now, I'm not saying every animation has to contain some deep philosophical meaning, but if you're putting so much time into something, then why not leave the viewer feeling inspired, entertained, emotional, or impacted in some positive way? Like, look at my animations, for example. They don't really have any deep morals woven into them, but I make them with the simple goal of making people laugh. And if I can genuinely make somebody laugh out loud while watching one of my animations, then to me, it was worth the weeks or even months that I spent on it. So when you're making an animation, consider what you want the viewer to leave with. Do you want them to feel inspired? Do you want them to laugh? Do you want them to feel a sense of adventure and excitement? That should be something you think about way before you even animate your first frame, because that becomes the framework from which you build your story. Now, maybe at this point you're thinking, yeah, but I make fight scene animations. I don't really need a story because people are only watching my stuff for the action and spectacle of it. And honestly, you are partially right on that. But let's take a quick look at two different fight animations to really understand the difference that storytelling can make. The first animation starts immediately with two random people running straight toward each other, throwing punches, doing crazy stunts, and all that good stuff you always want to see in a fight scene. And at the end, one guy beats the other up and strikes a final pose towards the camera as the screen cuts to black. Now, could this still be a good animation? I mean, yeah, it does have the potential of being a good animation. But now, let's look at the second animation, which has the potential of being a great animation. This animation doesn't start right in the middle of a fight scene. It instead starts with a guy stealing from a bank. Another guy sees the thief running away and starts chasing after him. Once he catches up, the fight scene begins. Now all of a sudden, with even the most generic story plot, the fight scene becomes way more engaging because there are actual stakes involved. We now have somebody we're rooting for to win, and we care more about the outcome because the story gave context and reason for the fight in the first place. Will the bad guy get away? Will the hero succeed in recovering the stolen goods? How will the story end? And that right there is why story matters so much. Even a very basic plot like that can massively improve the overall impact that the animation has on the viewer, and can actually grab their attention and put them on the edge of their seat. Now, a lot of people might respond to this and say something like, yeah, well, I'm just not very creative. My stories usually fall flat, and I can never come up with a good idea. And honestly, that is perfectly normal at first. I think all of us go through this when we're first starting out telling stories. But you really need to remember something here. Storytelling, like anything else, is a skill, and skills can be improved upon through repetition. The more reps you put into it, the better you get at it. So here's my challenge for you. I want you to write 3 compelling stories that could each be turned into a short 30-second to 1 minute long animation. And here's the kicker, you don't even have to animate these stories if you don't want to, but you should write them out as if you were going to make an animation about them. The idea here is to practice writing stories that grab the viewer's attention and make them want to see what happens until the end. They don't need to be deep, they don't need insane plot twists, they can simply just be fun to watch. The point here is to practice making stories that keep people engaged and give them a reason to come back to it and watch it all over again because the story was just that good. I have a lot more to talk about in regard to storytelling that I want to discuss in future videos, but since this video is already getting pretty long, I'll end it here by re-emphasizing this. Good animation won't fix bad storytelling. Put in the reps and make it your goal to become a better storyteller, not just a better animator, because trust me, there is a massive difference. As always, thank you so much for watching until the end. I know this was a much longer and different style of video than what I normally make, but honestly, this is the type of content that I want to shift towards moving forward. And this was my first attempt at this style of content. So if you have any critiques, feedback, or ideas on how I can improve this format, then feel free to let me know in the comments because I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. And also while you're down there in the comments, be sure to let me know what your thoughts are on storytelling and how you go about applying it in your animations. Thank you so much for watching, God bless you, and have an awesome rest of your day.